So let me ask you a question. Everybody likes being the bad guy, right? I mean, let's take Lord of the Rings, for example. We all assume want the good guys to win. But I would be lying if I said I didn't enjoy being the bad guy at the table, at least sometimes. But if you like being the problem at the table and you like role playing the bad guy, and if you like overwhelming value in the mid game, then I have a deck for you.
Command priority. Make the plays. Be the problem.
So here we have Sauron the Dark Lord at 3 and Grixis Avatar Horror 7/6 with Ward that is absolutely crazy for sacrifice a legendary artifact or legendary creature. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, amass Orcs 1. That's any spell, not just a non-creature, just anything. Whenever an army you control deals combat damage to a player, the ring tempts you, and then whenever the ring tempts you, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw 4 cards. Broken. Cutscene. If you would, do me the favor of liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing to this channel. It would really help me out a lot, and I would really appreciate it as a small YouTuber that's just trying to get going and making content for you all. It would help me out a lot, and again, I would appreciate it very much. So this deck list for Sauron the Dark Lord, I've built it to be a power level 8, and it is not ashamed of it at all. Solid 4 in the bracket system. The Ward just makes him crazy hard to remove. And in my opinion, like the movies, people kind of force themselves to forget about Sauron when you're playing with him at the table until they finally have to deal with him, and by then it's usually too late. So high power Lord of the Rings themed. This deck only has 10 cards that are not from Lord of the Rings or that have Lord of the Rings art. I wanted to keep the deck as much as that as I could because I myself am a huge Lord of the Rings fan. This deck's focused on amassing and then reanimation. So we want to be triggering Sauron's ability by getting him on the board as quickly as we can so that people can give us orcs. We're also looking to force opponents to make bad decisions in this deck through some choice spells. And this is very highly focused a mid-range deck. We're not really threatening the board too early, but once we get in the mid game and we are chugging along, he is a force to be reckoned with. Early game, what I like to set up, and it's not really necessary because he has such a crazy ward ability, but nonetheless, if I can, I like having a game plan of getting Sauron set up on the board with some extra protection and then something that will repeatedly, hopefully, tempt me with the ring. That way I can trigger Sauron and start putting big creatures in my graveyard and drawing a bunch of cards. As I said, the ring tempts us, precious. Precious! The ring tempting you is done in levels. So the first one, your ring bearer is legendary and can't be blocked by creatures with greater power. The second one is whenever your ring bearer attacks, you draw a card, then discard a card. Third is whenever your ring bearer becomes blocked by a creature, that creature's controller sacrifices it at the end of combat. And then the fourth is whenever your ring bearer deals combat damage to a player, each opponent loses 3 life. And these stay even if Sauron, say, gets removed. This is its own counter, kind of like experience counters. They're just there. Early game is very obviously we're trying to ramp toward the goal of getting Sauron out. We don't have green, so we're highly revolving around artifact ramp and then rituals. So you see here Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Talisman of Indulgence, Talisman of Dominance, and Talisman of Creativity. And added on to the back end of it, we have Chromatic Lantern, Commander Sphere, and Relic of Sauron. Now, I know some people may not like Chromatic Lantern in something like a 3-color deck. I don't mind it at all, especially in colors that don't have green, because I'm looking for as much ramp as I can get my hands on. So if I have to go with a 3-mana mana rock, I will. And then Relic of Sauron it's a decent way to draw some cards and discard a card, which would get some stuff in the graveyard that we may need, or just get us access to more cards. But I get it is a 4-mana mana rock. So early threats and value for later. This deck has 42 non-creature spells. So Sauron, the White Hand, is actually a pretty good backup commander, or if you just feel like running him sometimes as the face commander, he will actually do a pretty good job at what he's trying to do, because with all the non-creatures, the spells that we have, we're going to be able to, over the turns, make a pretty big orc army, and then they all will have Ward 2, which is nice from him, but it is a little bit more fragile of a plan in my opinion, but he will fit the bill if you ever want to run him as the face commander of this deck. So we got our Urkai captain here, Menace for black and a red. If one or more 1/1 counters will be put on an army, goblin, or orc you control, that many +1/+1 counters are put on it instead. And then Moria Scavenger is a card I'm always happy to see early game, because it comes down pretty quick, has death touch, haste, and then I can tap it to discard a card, draw a card, and if the discarded card was a creature card, I get to amass Orcs 1, so it gets me a little blocker on the table pretty quick. And as I mentioned before, Moria Scavenger, something that I love to be able to ditch out of my hand is Anger, just to give everything a haste. And that's a great thing to see early on. Some early threats and value for later. Orcish Siege Master, 2 and a red for an 0/5 with trample. Other orcs and goblins you control have trample. Whenever the Siege Master attacks, it gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So if you've got a large orc army out, when this one attacks, he will get a pretty large buff to his attack power as well. Brash Instigator. When this enters the battlefield, amass Orcs 2. When you do, until end of turn, gain control of target non-legendary creature an opponent controls with power less than or equal to the amassed army's power. Untap that creature, it gains haste until end of turn. So just a good way to snatch something from one of your opponents. And then Corsairs of Umbar, 3 and a blue for a 3/3. Human Pirate, it has a activated ability of 2 and a blue. Target goblin, orc, or pirate can't be blocked this turn, which is pretty handy for swinging in with a giant orc army that maybe at the time does not have trample, and be able to get it across the finish line there. Whenever Corsairs of Umbar deal combat damage to a player, amass Orcs 3. So a good way of amassing some orc army value early on. And yes, the overall game plan of this deck is all 9 Nazgûl. I have the amass in here. The amass is good. The amass fits its purpose. But what I want to do is get as many Nazgûl on the field as I can, buff them all, and then we've got a bunch of huge death touchers that nobody really wants to have to deal with. And then once you get something like Witch King of Angmar and or Lord of the Nazgûl on the battlefield with a whole bunch of buffed up Nazgûls, I mean, you're basically looking at a Lord of the Rings Blitzkrieg at that point. We're able to just start steamrolling people, and if they block stuff to save their life total, our Nazgûl are huge, so they won't be able to kill them anyway. Our Nazgûl have death touch, so whatever they block it with will die. And so it's just it's inevitable at that point. It's a matter of time. But the Witch King of Angmar is 3 and 2 black for a 5/3 flying Wraith Noble. Whenever one or more creatures deal combat damage to you, each opponent sacks a creature that dealt combat damage to you this turn. And the ring tempts you, is good for Sauron. Discard a card. Witch King of Angmar gains indestructible until end of turn, and you tap it. And then Lord of the Nazgûl is 3, a blue and a black for a 4/3 Wraith Noble with flying. Wraiths you control have protection from ring bearers. Not really relevant unless somebody else is playing a Lord of the Rings deck. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 3/3 black Wraith creature token with menace. Then if you control 9 or more Wraiths, Wraiths you control have base power and toughness 9/9 until end of turn. We do have quite a few instant and sorceries in here. Without double checking my deck list, I'm pretty sure it's 21 that we have split between instants and sorceries. Then the other part is going to be mass reanimate or target reanimate. I know you won't get the cast trigger off Sauron Lord of the Rings if you reanimate him, but you still have a 9/9 on the field that whenever a commander and opponent controls dies, the ring tempts you. But let's say you cast him. When you cast him, he amasses Orcs 5, you mill 5, and then you return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. We already talked about Lord of the Nazgûl and the Witch King of Angmar, but they are great reanimate targets. And then Warg Rider is also a really nice target for reanimate. 4 and a black for a 4/3 with menace, Orc Warrior. Other orcs and goblins you control have menace, so they're going to have to send 2 in its path to be able to block it. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you amass Orcs 2. So if you somehow can get him reanimated early, then at each one of your combats on your turn, you're going to amass Orcs 2 automatically. So the ones we're using to either mass reanimate or target reanimate are going to be Living Death, Animate Dead, or Traditional Reanimate. Board wipes, we aren't running a ton of those, but we do have a couple in here for in case we need them. So we have Toxic Deluge for 2 and a black. And as an additional cost to cast the spell, pay X life. All creatures get neg X until end of turn. And then good old Blasphemous Act, which is never cast for 9, it's always cast for 1, and deals 13 damage to each creature. If you want to be extra mean, and I have had this in the deck list before, it is not in the deck list right now because it is very mean, but that is Archfiend of Enfear. 3 and 2 black for a 5/4 demon with flying. Whenever you cycle or discard another card, put a -1/-1 counter on each creature your opponents control. So, Sauron wants the ring to tempt. When the ring tempts, we ditch our hand and we draw 4 cards. So if I ditch 4 cards and draw 4, it's gonna every creature our opponents control would get -4 on them. It's gonna basically be a one-sided board wipe for us. And that's off one trigger, and it's not that hard to actually trigger Sauron a couple times in a turn. So there's not a whole lot of creatures that I see very often that neg8 won't take care of. So I actually ended up taking this out of my list just for the sanity of my play group. But if you wanted to be extra mean, you could toss that in there, and I'll tell you it does some work. Alternate card draw either before Sauron comes down, or if somehow somebody wants to sack a legendary artifact or legendary creature and get rid of him, then we have Consider, Preordain, Black Market Connections, and then Call of the Ring as just some alternate card draw. And then making our opponents make some bad decisions, we have Sauron's Ransom. 1, a blue and a black for an instant. Choose an opponent, they look at the top 4 cards of your library and separate them into a face-down pile and a face-up pile. Put one pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. The ring tempts you. So we're getting some extra cards in our hand. The stuff that's going into our graveyard is fine because we are looking to reanimate stuff anyway, and we get a ring tempt, which will trigger Sauron anyway, so this is a great card. And then Palantir of Ornthak is a 3-mana legendary artifact. At the beginning of your end step, put an influence counter on the Palantir of Ornthak and scry 2. Then target opponent may have you draw a card. If that player doesn't, you mill X cards, where X is the number of influence counter on Palantir of Ornthak. And that player loses life equal to the total mana value of those cards. So early on, when I've had this on the battlefield, they always want me to mill the cards because it only has 1 or 2 counters on it. But once it gets up to where it has 4, 5, and 6 counters on it, they don't really want to run the risk of them taking 12 damage just to make me mill cards. So it's good either way. You're either getting extra cards in your hand, or somebody's choosing to kind of martyr themselves for the table, and they're going to be the first ones that are going to die. So in interaction, we've got Arcane Denial for 1 and a blue. Counter target spell. Its controller may draw up to 2 cards at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep, and then you get to draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. Swan Song. Counter target enchantment, instant, or sorcery. Its controller creates a 2/2 blue bird creature token with flying. Traditional counterspell. I wish they'd have made an art for Lord of the Rings for counterspell, because I would have it, and if they did and I somehow don't know about it, please let me know in the comments. And then Pact of Negation, which I pulled from one of my few collector boosters that I got of this set. And it's a 0 mana instant counter target spell, and then at the beginning of your next upkeep, pay 3 and 2 blue. If you don't, you lose the game. A few more interaction spells. We've got Feed the Swarm to destroy a target creature or enchantment for a 1 and a black. We will lose life equal to that permanent's mana value. Orcish Medicine for 1 and a black for an instant. Target creature gains your choice of lifelink or indestructible until end of turn. This, and you amass Orcs 1, so we get an Orc army. We can make something like, say, Sauron indestructible, or give something huge like a big Orc army lifelink to kind of bolster our life total a little bit. And then Lazotep Plating, 1 and a blue for an instant. You amass 1, then you and permanents you control gain hexproof until end turn. Enchantments, we got In the Darkness Bind Them for 2 in Grixis. Chapters 1, 2, and 3 are all create a 3/3 black wraith creature token with menace and the ring Tempest, which is good with Sauron and also good with our wraith package. Then on 4, for each opponent, gain control of up to one target creature that player controls until end of turn. Untap those creatures. They gain haste until end of turn, and the ring tempts us. Good way to take a big beater from somebody else and use it against them. Dread Horde Invasion is a good enchantment to get down early because we do lose a life, but we amass zombies 1. And then it kind of counteracts the life loss because whenever a zombie token you control with power 6 or greater attacks, it gains lifelink until end of turn. March from the Black Gate is similar in Dread Horde Invasion as it enters the battlefield, and whenever an army you control attacks, amass orcs 1. And then Fall of Karandros is 2 and a red for an enchantment that says whenever a creature an opponent controls is dealt excess non-combat damage, amass orcs X, where X is that excess damage. And then you can pay 7 and a red to have this enchantment deal 7 damage to target creature. Other artifacts that we didn't talk about previously, Nazgûl Battle Mace, 5 mana artifact equipment. Equipped creature has Menace, Death Touch, Annihilator 1, and whenever an opponent sacks a non-token permanent, put that card on the battlefield under your control unless that player pays 3 life, with an equip cost of 3. Of course, we're running the 1 ring because we are Sauron and we need our ring. So 4 mana, everybody knows what this is. Indestructible. Enters the battlefield. If you cast it, you gain protection from everything until your next turn. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burden counter on the 1 ring, and you can tap it to put a burden counter on the 1 ring, then draw a card for each burden counter on the 1 ring. Last but not least, Morgul Knife. Reskin of Shadow Spear for 1 mana equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has trample and lifelink. Pay 1 and permanents your opponent's control lose hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, and with equip cost of 2. Ramp and other non-creatures. Faithless Looting is kind of card advantage, but I didn't put it in the card draw section. So 1 mana sorcery to draw 2, then discard 2 with a flashback cost of 2 and a red. So it is good for getting stuff that we need in the graveyard to reanimate or mass reanimate. Treason of Isengard is a really good one for putting a target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard on top of your library, and then you amass orcs 2. Then we've got a couple rituals, Dark Ritual and Cabal Ritual. Both are just ways of boosting our mana production to be able to ramp out Sauron. Some special lanes we have for support. The Black Gate enters the battlefield. You may pay 3 life. If you don't, it enters the battlefield tapped. Taps for a black, but the main thing here is 1 in a black, tap it, choose a player with the most life or tie for the most life. Target creature can't be blocked by creatures that player controls this turn. So a way to pick an opponent that has the most life and send your biggest orc army at them and they can't block it. Minas Morgul, Dark Fortress, legendary land. It enters the battlefield tapped, taps for black, and then 3 in a black. Tap it, put a shadow counter on target creature for as long as that creature has a shadow counter on it. It's a wraith in addition to its other types. So just upping our wraith count. And also a creature with a shadow on it can block or be blocked only by creatures with shadow. So essentially could make something unblockable. Barad-dûr enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a legendary creature, which we normally will. Tap to add a black, and then XX in black to tap it, amass orcs X, activate only if a creature died this turn. Mount Doom, legendary land, tap, pay a life, add a black or a red. 1 a black and a red to tap it, and it deals a damage to each opponent, which is not really what it's here for. And then 5 a black and a red, tap it, sacrifice Mount Doom and a legendary artifact, choose up to 2 creatures, then destroy the rest, activate only as a sorcery. So that's kind of if the Palantir gets too many counters on it, I can sack this and it basically have a board wipe except for 2 creatures, and then saves me from having to mill more cards if I'm going to run out of cards. And then good old Rogue's Passage, just to make something unblockable. Land count and deck list. There's 24 lands in here, 3 mountains, 3 islands, and 4 swamps for a total of 34 lands. So if you want to check out the deck list, just go to the link tree. Click on my Mox field, it'll take you right there, and you'll be able to check out the rest of the deck list there. And if you decide to build it or alter yours to look like it, I hope that it is a lot of fun for you and that your play group hates it.